which has been existing in this area since back in 1960. With me here to my right or your left is Ann Pickett, the president of the Eastern Ontario Concert Orchestra, and to my left or your right is Sister Barbara Chibot, who I've known for a great number of years, and she's been a violinist in the orchestra. I don't know how many years, but we'll find out. But I think we'll go first to Ann. Ann, you have been president for your first year right now?
This is my first year as president, yes.
Do you find it exciting?
I find it really exciting. This is a wonderful organization to be associated with. It's like we do everything that is involved in presenting a concert. It doesn't matter how large the orchestra is or how small. We're just involved in everything. So it could be the Toronto Symphony, it could be it is the Eastern Ontario Concert Orchestra, but we're involved in all facets of the presenting of the concert.
And the main thing coming up orchestra since, well, it was formed by the late Stephen Choma in 1960, and I have been involved in it on and off since 1961, so I have a rough idea about the background of the orchestra. Why the change of name?
Well, I understand that it was discussed for a long time, and various boards have discussed it over the years. And this board and the musicians at this time decided that it was the right time to do it. And it was a difficult decision because it has such a long history in the community, and also a lot of people are very emotionally attached to it, especially the people who knew Stephen Choma, and this was his dream. But what we think now is that the orchestra has grown in a lot of ways, and now at this time there are orchestras in the surrounding communities, and we think that it's better if the name of the orchestra reflects the region that it serves.
More so than just Eastern Ontario.
Yes, yes, because what we do now is we don't travel anymore. We have our concerts in the one place. People come to us. And so Quinte really reflects the area from which we draw our audience and our musicians and also our corporate support.
Tell me, I remember in years gone by, the musicians came from all over the area. Where from now, besides Belleville and Trenton?
Well, we still have musicians coming from all over the area. So they come from as far south, Bloomfield, and west, Whitby. And
that far west,
yes,
eh?
yes, our principal cello player, she comes from Whitby. And far north, Sterling and Marmora.
Madoc?
I don't know anyone from Madoc right now, but Tweed and Kingston, Napanee.
What's the nearby area? Frankfurt, Sterling?
Frankfurt, Sterling, yes.
Mattawa?
Around
Mattawa.
yes, Mattawa.
That's where it started.
That's where it started,
and that's where they used to have their practices. Well, I think it's a good idea to change it to the new name, what you're coming up with. Orchestra Quinte or Quinte Orchestra?
Quinte Symphony.
Quinte Symphony. Well, you've got the necessary complements. You've got the strings, the woodwinds, the brass, and the percussion to make a full symphony orchestra.
Yes.
And another question, your conductor, who's been with you, I think about 8 or 9 years now.
10 years now.
10
He's just,
years
yes.
coming up. Gordon
This is-
Craig. Is he in favor of the name too?
Yes, he is, yes.
And, when will this name come into being? The first of the millennium, which is, we're not in the millennium yet, the end of this year?
Well, actually, I have good news.
Oh.
Because as of February the 1st, legally, it has been changed.
I see.
So we have the documents now.
So your programs will have the new name on it?
No, they won't. We'll
Not
still
yet.
continue with Eastern Ontario Concert Orchestra because that's what people expect. It's only contracts and other things. But no, we will change that, our advertising, our promotion, when we think it's the right time to do it.
In this forthcoming, well, we're getting near the end of the season, is the orchestra going to do any outreach concerts like they did in past years in the summertime? Anything planned in that regard? They used to perform maybe in Trenton or perform in Belleville here over at Swick Sound.
Well, we have no concerts planned outside. The only other concert we have outside our series now is the Beat Beethoven run, and that will
Oh,
be
that was like
Shuffle to Schumann, but yes, we're playing Beethoven now, so we're calling it Beethoven.
And what are you playing by Beethoven?
Beethoven number 2.
Second Symphony in D. Oh, it's a very good work.
It's
very
lovely,
good work.
yes.
I'm going to come back to you for a minute. I want to get over here now to Sister Barbara Tevel. How long have you been with the orchestra?
I've been with the orchestra for about 14 years, and I've really enjoyed that as an individual playing, and it's been a good outlet for me.
You're in the violin section?
Yes, I am.
First or second?
I play in the second violins.
Second violin.
Yes.
Do you find any of the works that that the orchestra performs a little bit challenging?
Oh, some of them are very challenging, and I think that's good. We need to be challenged. Sometimes we play works that are not quite so challenging, and that's a little break for us. But I think it's important that we do stretch ourselves, and we do play a little more difficult works.
Does the complement of the orchestra ever have an idea that they want a certain composition performed? Do they go to the conductor, or does the conductor choose everything?
Well, a few years ago, a committee was formed consisting of some of the members of the orchestra, with Gordon, our conductor, and members of the board, to discuss the programs and to put forth ideas. I think also we've had surveys go out to our audience to get a feel for what the people would enjoy. So we try to incorporate that into each year's plan for our programs.
And another thing you have in every year's program is you have soloists.
Oh yes, and I think that's become quite an important component of our concert series. We've had some very exciting soloists over the last few years, and I'm sure that's going to continue. And I think in many cases that's really had our audience raise some interest there and a little more awareness of our orchestra.
Mm-hmm. And a new venue, we've been not too long, a year or so, at Bridge Street Church here. And that will take in a much larger audience, although we had very successful performances at Eastminster.
Yes, we did, but I guess we thought now we had outgrown the space at Eastminster, and now that we are at Bridge Street, we're enjoying this very much. The acoustics are very good in the church, and that has certainly been a plus for us.
Now, I want to come to another facet of the orchestra, of certain members. I'm speaking of yourself and John Spott. You're doing outreach programs to the elementary schools in Belleville and Trenton?
Yes, we are. We began this past fall to do some outreach in the community, which we always felt was very important for the orchestra to give us a little more exposure. John and I have been visiting some schools. John is a violin maker, and he brings a lot of his tools and materials that he uses in building violins. He tells the students how you build a violin. He brings the materials so they can actually see them and feel them. Then John and I usually play some duets on our violins for the students. And then after that, we allow the students a chance to hold a violin and try to draw the bow over the strings. And that is very exciting for them. And the students are really very excited about that, and they look forward to getting a hold of a violin. And it's interesting when we do that. I find that some students have a natural knack for holding a violin, and particularly the bow. It's really interesting to watch, and to watch their faces when they do produce some sound from the violin.
Do they ever ask you unusual questions like, do they use violins in rock music, or are there violins in country and western? So the students are in the younger ages.
Well, they really haven't asked us those questions specifically, but I think when John explains to them how old the violin is and its development over the years, they see it's often associated with classical music, although he does make reference to the fact that it is played in other venues as well.
Well, since this started last fall, you're going to make this an annual program to continue on with the schools in future years?
Oh yes, we hope to continue this, and there are other schools out there we're waiting to schedule some time to go into them. So we hope to continue this program, and hopefully other members of the orchestra would get involved in this kind of thing with us.
In other words, might be woodwinds might go out in future years of brass.
That's always a possibility, and I think it's important sometimes that we bring them instruments that they are not always familiar with, particularly the strings. And many students that we see have already been exposed to the woodwinds and other band instruments, but not the strings. So our hope is to give them a little bit of an idea of what it is to play strings, and maybe to spark some interest there and have more players for the future for our orchestra.
Are they quite inquisitive?
Oh yes, they're very inquisitive, and they're very attentive and interested in everything that they see, particularly the tools that John uses in building his violins.
He takes them right more or less from scratch up to towards the finished product?
Yes, he tells them he starts with a piece of wood, and he shows them the piece of wood he starts with, and then some of the tools he uses to do some of the fine work to finish his product.
Well, this is a very interesting program that you and John have brought into the schools. I think it should go on for years. And as I said before, bring in the percussion, bring in the brass. It'll be kind of hard to go to all the schools and take pilgrims, wouldn't it?
It would be a little difficult. However, I think it's a good thing, and I think it's something we should continue and we should expand.
And it doesn't hurt to advertise.
No, it doesn't.
Getting back to you now, Anne, coming up to next year, your concerts that are brought forward, are they planned a year in advance or a few months in advance, or how is that done?
They're planned early in the beginning of the year. We've already had our meeting to plan the concerts, and what we do is, as Sister Barbara has said, we get together with members of the orchestra who are interested, some of the board members, and with Gordon, the conductor, and we discuss ideas. And so we have our program outlined for this year. We have one commitment already, and the rest, although we have the framework for it, we still need to have commitments from soloists, and that's the more time-consuming part. And so we're starting our year with Greg Butler. He has given us his commitment, and so our first concert in the new season will be, as Quinte Symphony, will be featuring Greg Butler.
And, well, he's well known in Bellwood because Greg has made many performances here. He was a native of Bellwood. He's been in Windsor for the last 22, 23 years. He has always drawn a really good crowd when he comes here. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now we've got him committed to coming here this fall.
Yes.
Well, you know, old titles die slowly. I imagine people will still call it the EOCO for the next 2 or 3 years, even though we're changing it to Quinte Symphony. And I think it's a good idea to do that. And coming into the new century, and a new name, and it represents the entire Quinte area.
Yes.
So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And all your board of directors, and also to Sister Barbara Thiesbo and your outreach programs with you and John Spott. The best success in the future for both of you.
Thank you.
With me now, to my immediate right or your left, is Dorothy Cotton, and she plays the jokester of the orchestra, the bassoon. It's a very low instrument in the woodwind section. And this handsome gentleman to my far right or your left is our conductor for the last, I think, 10 years, Gordon Craig, who comes from Kingston. Now, I think I'm going to ask Gordon a couple of questions first, and I understand you're going to put me under the spotlight. Gordon, what are the plans for the orchestra for the next year?
The program for next year has been started. We have Greg Butler coming, as you mentioned earlier. We're doing a program of Christmas Around the World with a narrator going right around the world. We have a concerto competition coming up, and the winner of the concerto competition will appear. And those are the 3 principal concerts, one more, but that's getting us started for now.
One thing that an orchestra such as the Quinte Symphony now is always looking for new musicians. Let us know what type of new musicians, what type of instruments that you're short on.
Primarily strings in all the sections, but we're also always looking for really good brass and wind players. We've had a number of students who've come through the high school system who have come on and played with Quinte Symphony and have gone on and gone to university. Some who have now even gone on to do graduate work in music, and we're really proud of their abilities and our efforts to help them with their music. So we have a core of players who've stayed with us for many years, and then we have a number of players who come in and play for several years and then go on to university. So we're always looking, and the easiest way to find out is in September, early in September, is to phone our general manager, Lena Cabré, and set up an audition, and she'll know which areas that we need.
Would it be possible for somebody to come out to one of your rehearsals?
It's possible for them to come and watch.
Yes. I don't mean to play. A budding musician to come out.
No, that would be fine. They're more than welcome to come and watch a rehearsal. And in fact, I think we've had that happen on a couple of occasions.
Right now, how many musicians do you have to bring into a concert out of the Quinte area?
Well, we have a core of players who come in from Kingston who really don't fall into that category. These are regular members of Quinte Symphony who, with their dedication and their commitment, make the orchestra in part what it is, along with all the regular players from Belleville and from all of the Quinte region. But in addition to that, we normally bring in maybe 2 or 3 string players, and that's all. The rest is all just full-time members.
Tell me about your rehearsals. When do they take place? Are they an hour, 2 hours? Give me something about rehearsal, because you've got to have practice sessions.
We rehearse every Sunday night from 7 till 10. Normally we would stop a little bit early at the front part of the rehearsal program, but as we get closer to the concert date, the rehearsals get a little longer. So, and it depends on just how many rehearsals we have for a program and how difficult the program is.
A question I shouldn't ask, but I will. How is the attendance of the orchestral personnel at a rehearsal?
Generally very good. Generally very good. If we have a fairly heavy program, then as we get closer to the concert date, attendance is really excellent. But there are many commitments that a lot of these people have and that some of the students have outside of the orchestra, exams, projects, and things like that. I certainly encourage them to be at all the rehearsals.
Oh, yes. You've got your something about Beethoven coming up in the spring, follow-up to Shuffle to Schumann.
Well, we initiated this in Belleville years ago with a Shuffle to Schumann. The reason for that, we had just done the Schumann Spring Symphony, which seemed very appropriate in the spring. But the program is actually called Beat Beethoven, and it was started out in Calgary, I believe. It's been picked up by a number of orchestras, and so we're doing now Beethoven Second Symphony, and the runners start at the very beginning of the symphony, and their job is to finish the run before we finish the symphony.
And it's been successful in the past.
It's been quite successful. It grows every year. We get more runners every year.
Rain or shine?
Runners are a strange breed. They don't care. Musicians care, but the runners...
You're under a canopy.
Well, yeah, we are. We are. Yep. But for the runners, often if it's a little bit cool and maybe marginally damp, that's even better than if it was in the hot sun.
One last question to you. What I've seen you do in the past, I think that you are more of an optimist for the future of the orchestra than pessimist. In other words, the glass is half full, not half empty, right?
Oh, for sure. The orchestra's come in an enormous way in the 10 years that I've been here. And you only need to look at the concert program we're doing on March the 5th. We're doing Elgar Enigma Variations, Chopin Piano Concerto, and a wonderful little overture. So it's gone from a very light pops orchestra to an orchestra that's capable of doing major symphonic repertoire.
What is your complement of the orchestra now, roughly?
About 45.
About 45. So you can do a lot of works of the classical romantic literature.
Well, you have to remember that even Brahms symphonies were written for an orchestra of this size. I mean, the recordings that we have now of Brahms are normally done with big orchestras with maybe 16 first and 16... Well, I'm not sure I'd call them bloated, but large. But the Brahms orchestration was written for an orchestra of this size. Now, we've never done a Brahms symphony, but I certainly wouldn't exclude it.
Well, I'm looking forward someday to hear Brahms' fifth. No, he only wrote 4 symphonies, but we'll get maybe one of the 4. Now, understand here that Dorothy wants to put me under the gun. What for?
Well, perhaps we'll turn the tables. As I listen to you and Gordon talking, I realize you both have a lot more history, and you a lot more history than Gordon does. I've been with the orchestra for about 5 years, and I don't think a rehearsal goes by that we don't hear your name mentioned in some context. Tell me about how you first got involved with the orchestra and what you were up to back at the very beginning.
Stephen Choma formed the orchestra at Batawa, as I recall, 1960. And in 61, the following year, he contacted me, why I don't know, and said they wanted a master of ceremonies. Would I come out and introduce the different selections that they were going to play? And in those days, they traveled around the area. They were Madoc and Tweed, Marmor, Norwood. We even went as far as Tilsonburg once. That was Stephen's hometown. And so, a period of maybe 20 years, I tagged along with the orchestra and introduced each piece that they played, gave a little background, if I could think of something. If not, I could lie like a trooper, you know. And that's the way it started out. And when Stephen suddenly died, I think it was in May or April 77, we were caught in a real bind because we had 2 programs lined up, and Kerry Stratton, who is now the conductor of the North York Symphony Orchestra, he was in Nova Scotia. And I phoned him, and he came up and took over the orchestra just like that. And the 2 programs, I remember, and the program we did after Stephen died, it was 4 days later, and half the members of the orchestra were crying when they were playing. I can remember that. And we've had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun with the orchestra and all our tours we went and all that. It was great fun, and I could write a book out of it.
Yeah, well, tell us some stories. I understand you have many good stories. 40 years of orchestra must lead to some good stories. What were some of your favorite times?
Well, I'll tell you just one. Sister Barbara's looking at me. This is a story that no one knows about.
Not yet.
I will not tell you where it happened, but we used to go to a certain town within 5 miles from Belleville. And when we went there, every time we went there, we had the soloist was a local of the local town or village. And might have been a violinist, it could have been a pianist, could have been a vocalist, I'm not going to tell you. Anyhow, this soloist, every time we went to this town, he would take a bottle of gin and put it in the back of the toilet bowl, the toilet, the tank in behind there, and when he would come out to perform, and he would perform maybe 3 or 4 numbers, and every time he came out, he'd rush to the toilet, take a swig of gin. No one knew about it except Stephen Choma and I, the conductor, and he would come back on, and as the program progressed, his notes got worse and worse. And this went on for, I'd say 8-10 years. That was comical. One other time that was comical, I was emceeing the program in Norwood. Everybody in Norwood seemed to be there. It was packed in the community center. And I didn't know that there was a chap that took epileptic fits. I took with me to Norwood that day 2 good close friends, two fellows that came out with me. I was on stage, the spotlight was on me. It was about the 3rd number that the orchestra were going to play, and I couldn't see the audience with the spotlight, and all of a sudden I heard, I couldn't figure what was going on. And I thought these 2 fellows from Belleville were pulling some kind of a joke on me. And I just froze. What do you do? And all of a sudden I see people running down the aisle. I thought, what's going on? Is there a fire? What? This chap that everybody in Norwood knew took epileptic fits had taken one while I was talking. I don't blame him for taking one. And they rushed down and took him out. But that was very embarrassing. And how do you just freeze, you don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. That was 2 of them. I won't tell you anymore.
Well, I imagine there's a lot that's happened over the years, but I also imagine the orchestra is very, very different now from what it was when you first started with it. How has the orchestra changed?
Well, their programs are different. When they first started out, they always had medleys of tunes from down south of the Mason-Dixon line, and they'd have some Victor Herbert, and they'd have, how many times did I hear Greensleeves? I don't know. And they had lighter compositions, more a salon type. They didn't go into wouldn't dare try a Schumann symphony or Beethoven symphony, and the first overture I ever heard them play, and it was disastrous, but it's the overture that every orchestra in the world plays. What is that, Gordon? Poet and Peasant. Poet and Peasant. But their programs with different conductors over the years, they had many different conductors, gradually got more serious. And even today the program, it's not all, your programs are not all serious. You're trying to appeal to different personalities. Somebody might like Beethoven, somebody might like Lerner Loewe. So you try to appeal to everybody.
Well, you're still involved in the programming for the orchestra. You're consulted around that, are you?
Oh,
Do you render opinions?
Well, they ask me, but they don't pay any attention to what I say. No.
Are there other ways you see the orchestra as being different? The programming's different? Do you think it's a different
No,
role
as I said, the programming has improved in the years that have gone by. I mean, you're in your 40th year or 41st. It's improved, and under Gordon's baton, you put on some excellent programs and good soloists. I can't say anything wrong about it.
Sounds good to
He
me.
thought I would, too.
Well, maybe I can just ask one question to Gordon to wrap things up. Where do you see the orchestra going at this point? We've heard about some of the changes that have happened. What do you see down the road for the Quinte Symphony?
We're gradually building up a set of core players in the string section. That's certainly made a difference. It certainly helped. I would like to see the orchestra continue to be able to present really high symphonic concerts. It's always enjoyable working with really fine soloists, so I think it's important we continue to do that. And I think 1 or 2 concerts every year should really feature the orchestra so that there's real material for the players in the orchestra to get involved with.
With me now, Heather Grant Ferguson. To my left or your right, and Lenny Kabur to my right or your left. I think I'll start out with Lennica. You've been involved with the orchestra how long?
8 years.
And you were president for 2 years.
That's right. Yeah.
What is your opinion of the way the orchestra has improved since you came to be associated with the orchestra?
It has improved greatly. We once went to listen to the orchestra before I ever became involved, and the sound was not nearly what it is now. And so I have been really impressed with the way things have grown and evolved.
Your job as manager, what does that entail?
Well, the year starts with the music selection committee, of which you're a member, and your opinion is valued there. From there, we are in touch with soloists. From there, we set dates for concerts, and before each concert, publicity needs to be done, you know, and not only for each concert, but also for the year. The program book needs to be printed, advertisers visit it, the brochure needs to be printed, and publicity on the whole is a fairly big part of it, but also the actual running of or organizing behind the scenes of a concert, to setting up, making sure everything is there for everybody. And there are other things, such the Beat Beethoven that has been mentioned before. And what else can I mention now?
What do you find the most taxing?
The most taxing?
And I'm not referring to income tax.
Probably the publicity end of it.
That's in the fall time when you're going out to the different advertisers and getting them to come into the program book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah. It's a big job, the program book. Yeah.
Do you have many inquiries that come to you being a manager of the orchestra from members of the orchestra? Do they come to you at all?
No, what I do get, though, is inquiries from the public at large, because they want musicians to play at their weddings. Recently I got 3 or 4 of those.
Well, the EOCO, or Quinte Symphony, they used to do that. Some members of the orchestra would go out and play like a string quartet
Right.
at weddings and social functions.
Right.
Does that still happen?
They still do. Yeah. Yeah. Some
They
do.
give them experience.
Oh, sure.
Well, we're going to go over to Heather Ferguson. Heather, how long have you been with the orchestra?
Oh, boy. I joined in the fall of 1960 when I was a student at Quinte
1960. You got me beat by 1 year.
I was a student at Quinte Secondary in grade 10, and my parents were involved in it. My dad played violin, and Mom eventually got involved as the pianist, and I thought this would be a good experience and would help my musical studies at high school as well. So I borrowed one of their French horns at high school and went to rehearsals at Padua.
And it's been French horn ever since?
I've been playing French horn in the orchestra ever since, yes.
Yes, but you play, you're a pianist too, and you've been mixed up in education and music for years.
True.
Hear about that?
Well, I was a teacher with the Hastings County Board of Education for 32 years, and most of it was spent teaching music from kindergarten to grade 8, and vocal and instrumental to the grade 7s and 8s. And it's been interesting through the years to see some of my former students in elementary school. As they got into high school, they would come out and play in the orchestra as well, so that was really interesting to see.
And your father was in the violin section for a great number of years.
Yes, he just retired about 3 years ago, and he started in, as I said, in 1960, so he was about 87 when he finished playing in the orchestra.
Your mother was pianist back in the early years?
That's right, in the 1960s and 70s, when they didn't have as many lower strings like cellos and basses, so that would fill in the lower strings and some of the harmony as well.
Being a French horn player, can you name me one piece that you find that you kind of shiver before you play it? And I don't mean a solo work like a Mozart concerto, but I mean a certain horn passage of some work that is really a challenge.
Well, in the early days, I remember it was the London Suite that we played with Stephen, and that was a real piece to work on, and that gave us a lot of tense moments. Recently, I can't think of anything that was extremely difficult. I remember a few years ago when we did the Firebird, or sections from the Firebird. That was, yes. Mm-hmm.
I think a question that comes to mind in regards to the horn players, I think that the horn is one of the most golden instruments of all. You've got how many now in the orchestra now? 3?
We're down to 2 now.
Down to 2?
Mm-hmm. We had 4, but we're down to 2 at this point. So.
And I would imagine you're going to continue playing the horn for quite a few years yet.
Well, as long as the lungs hold out.
How long do you practice at home?
Not that much, really. What I usually do is find the sections in the pieces that would give me some problem, and they're just the parts that I would work on. And most of the time, I just practiced here at orchestra practice. So.
And your dear mother, Eileen, and your father, Billy Grant, William Grant, I see them come out to all the concerts. And if you put the number of years that you, your father, and your mother have been involved in the orchestra, you're going to hit over the century mark, aren't you?
I think that would be quite true, yes.
Thank you very much, Heather Ferguson. I always think of Heather Grant Ferguson. And Lenny Kabura, our manager. And you two girls have enlightened me quite a bit about managing an orchestra and playing a French horn. Right here, Debbie Shaw, who is a flute player in the orchestra. Been how many years, Debbie?
Almost 11 years.
No kidding.
Yep.
And Ewan McLean is a cello player.
Yep.
How did you ever take up the cello? How was that instrument that you chose?
When I was in grade 4 in Victoria, we had to take an instrument, and my string teacher was a cellist, and she chose the cello for me.
Well, she chose it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you'd had your choice, would you have chosen the cello?
Possibly not, because all my friends played violin, but now she held out the instruments, let me hold the instruments and see which one suited me best. And she thought that I should be a cellist.
Do you think when you have a few more years under your belt that you'll be playing big cello concertos, like the Dvorak one, some of the Boccherini ones? What do you think?
I'll do my best to, but it depends where my career takes me.
And is your career going to be in the Quinte area with Quinte Symphony in the years to come, or is it a big question mark?
I think no. This is my first and last year at the orchestra. I think because
first and last year.
Yeah, because I'm leaving Belleville, and I'm possibly doing a minor in music at university.
Where?
I'm not sure yet. Whoever will accept me.
You know, that's the thing that's happened in the orchestra over all the years since they formed, and this is no swat at you, it's the transient musicians that came in and went on to university in musical endeavors and where, like Gordon Craig, the conductor, he's got a good cellist, comes in for 1 year, doesn't want to lose him, but he can't retain him. He says, you've got to go on and make your own career, and that happens. But then in the orchestra, we have stalwarts have been going on, well, some for 35, well, Heather Ferguson, 40 years at it. It's different, and it's just one of the things you get with symphony orchestras, which aren't of the big metropolitan style like Toronto Symphony or New York Philharmonic, things like that. We'll go back to Debbie here with the flute. How come you chose the flute?
Interesting question. I started out when I was in grade 3 or 4 with the recorder, and that was in Ottawa, and we were given a music aptitude test at the end of the year, and they suggested appropriate instruments, and it was either clarinet or flute, and I had my heart set on a flute. I always loved the sound of it.
Have you ever done any solo flute work?
A little bit at church for services and weddings and so on, and with a friend who plays classical guitar.
Oh, yes. We were talking about people, small groups going out in the orchestra in weddings. You do that.
Yes.
There was a young girl that used to do that. She's not with the orchestra now. Veronique, do you remember her?
Yes. Yeah,
She
I've
was a
played
flute
with her.
player, too.
Yes.
Does she go out in a duo with you?
Yes, she does. We've done that in the past and with some other groups at the Mary's New York Levy and other events in town.
Do you think that I could ever prevail upon Gordon to maybe have you play one of the Mozart flute concertos? Hmm? You ever played them?
Oh, no, I haven't played them myself. I listen to them, though. Yes.
And you're going to stay with the orchestra for quite a number of years in the future.
Definitely,
yeah.
yes.
But you were president once, weren't you?
Yes, I started off as secretary soon after I joined the orchestra, and then stayed on for, I think, about 7 years, and worked my way up to president for a couple of years, yes.
But the orchestra is you, and you are the orchestra.
Yes, and it's really interesting to get the perspective of being on the board as well as being a musician in the orchestra.
You're on both sides of the fence
Yeah.
now. Yeah. Well, thanks, Debbie Shaw and Ewan McLean. And previous to this, we've been talking to Gordon Craig. I'm trying to remember everyone. Heather Ferguson, Sister Barbara Tivo, and Pickett. Who else were we talking to? Lenica Buer. We wouldn't dare leave Lenica out. And this is more just a kind of a little homely gathering, people getting together, giving their insights, their ideas, and their background when they were with the Eastern Ontario Concert Orchestra, which is now coming up this year, and it's going to be called the Quinte Symphony. And I know our viewers who come to see the Quinte Symphony, and they perform at Bridge Street United Church. There are, I think there's 2 more concerts to come. 2, Gordon? Yes. And they're one of the main musical stalwarts and bulwarks of the Quinte area, and I hope that our viewers will take a Sunday afternoon off and come out and see the Quinte. And if you're a good runner, come on out to the Beat Beethoven. I'm Eugene Lang, and this is Update.
So what you get is 4 and bum bum.